This whole thing over the last 3 years, the Porter's Gate Worship Project, has kind of its very creative center, this idea of ecumenicism. An ecumenicism that says, I come with gifts of the Spirit of my tradition, but I come also with the poverty of my tradition, looking for the charisms and the gifts of your tradition. When it's come time to have a worship service that's sort of themed on vocation or something, I had just noticed as a worship leader that maybe we're a little weak in that area. So the idea came out of that to say, what if we wrote original songs about vocation? One of the ways we described the record is we wanted to write songs that people could take with them back into their Monday morning that would meet people where they were when they sort of came in the doors, acknowledging their vocational lives. The last record was called Work Songs, and this record is tentatively titled Neighbour Songs. We wanted to write songs that would enrich people in their relationships, and also songs that you could bring the fullness or the brokenness of your relationships to in worship and would meet you in those places.
Love the Lord your God with all your heart and your soul and your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. This is at the heart and the core of the Bible, of Christian practice, at least in theory. The thing that gets tough is when the church or any group of people assumes that things are as they always have been. And so like, I used to love my neighbor when I was 10 by X, Y, and Z. Our church did this. We're not necessarily looking around at our actual neighbors and saying, what are their actual needs? And I think that this record is a great attempt at figuring out what those questions are, attempting to ask them honestly.
Your labor is not in vain.
Some of us who lead worship on Sundays have had the experience of showing up for church on a Sunday where something really terrible has happened that week. And you think to yourself in those moments, oh, well, we need to address this in worship, like we need to have a lament song today. But one of the things I've been learning over the last couple of years, every single week, there is someone walking in that is feeling just as heavy of a burden as maybe the whole congregation feels on a week that there's been a car accident or something. And when you start looking at the congregation that way, the words of the Psalms, the lament Psalms, feel like a much more essential component of the worship service in general.
You can recall when 9/11 happened, strangers began to connect to one another in the grocery stores, letting each other cry. Lament and corporate grieving reminds us of the delusion of the ego, because one of the delusions of the ego is that I am fundamentally and completely separate from you, but that's not actually the highest reality. And there's something about both corporate grief and corporate celebration that breaks down those walls a little bit. It is a way to remind ourselves of how deeply connected that we are. One of the best benefits of church is that it insists on another story.